They said her suicide mission was the only way to stop nuclear war, until she proved there was a way to save both the world and herself. This story begins at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, where Captain Aria Phoenix Blake was completing her final briefing for what everyone believed would be a one-way mission. At 29 years old, Aria was one of the most skilled F-16 pilots in the Air Force, with over 2,000 flight hours and a reputation for finding solutions to impossible problems. But even she had never faced a challenge like this. "Captain Blake," said General Rebecca Storm Carter during the emergency briefing at Nellis, "at 0847 hours this morning, our satellites detected an unauthorized nuclear missile launch from a rogue facility. The warhead is heading directly toward downtown Los Angeles. Impact time, 23 minutes. 50,000 people will die if that missile reaches its target." Aria studied the tactical displays with the focused intensity that had made her one of the Air Force's most effective pilots. The incoming missile was a sophisticated ICBM with advanced countermeasures that made conventional interception nearly impossible. Every defensive system had failed to lock onto the weapon. Colonel Marcus Thunder Williams, the base commander, outlined the horrific reality. "Our ground-based interceptors missed. Navy SM-3s can't reach the target. The missile's stealth coding and electronic warfare capabilities have defeated every conventional defense we have." Major Jessica Lightning Torres, the weapons systems officer, delivered the final blow. "Captain, according to our calculations, the only way to stop this missile is through direct collision with an aircraft. The explosion will detonate the warhead at altitude, dispersing the radiation over a wide area instead of creating a ground-level nuclear explosion in the city." Aria felt the weight of 50,000 lives settling on her shoulders. "What's the survival probability for the pilot?" The silence in the room was deafening. General Carter finally spoke. "Zero, Captain. This is a suicide mission. The radiation from the nuclear detonation will kill anyone within a 5-mile radius, even with ejection and protective equipment." But Aria had spent her entire career refusing to accept impossible odds, and she wasn't about to start now. "General, I need 30 seconds to review something," Aria said, pulling up technical specifications on her tablet. Her mind was racing through calculations that most pilots would never attempt under this kind of pressure. Aria had been studying advanced ejection seat technology and radiation shielding as part of her master's degree in aerospace engineering. She knew something that the mission planners hadn't considered. The new ACES-3 ejection seat in her F-16 had experimental shielding that might provide enough protection for a few critical seconds. "Ma'am, I accept the mission, but I'm not accepting the death sentence," Aria announced. "I have a plan that could allow me to complete the interception and survive." Colonel Williams looked at her with obvious skepticism. "Captain, the radiation levels from a nuclear detonation will be lethal for extended exposure," Aria interrupted. "But if I time the ejection perfectly and use the aircraft's momentum to clear the initial radiation burst, the ACES-3's experimental shielding might protect me long enough to get clear." Major Torres was already running calculations on her computer. "Aria, even if the ejection seat's shielding works perfectly, you'd be ejecting directly through a radioactive cloud. The exposure time alone would be approximately 4.7 seconds based on my aircraft's speed and trajectory," Aria finished. "The ACES-3 was designed to protect pilots from electromagnetic pulses and radiation for up to 8 seconds. It's never been tested under these conditions, but the theoretical protection exists." General Carter studied Aria with the expression of someone who had seen too many young pilots volunteer for impossible missions. "Captain, you're talking about ejecting through the fireball of a nuclear explosion. Even if you survive the radiation, the heat and blast effects will be minimized if I eject at the optimal moment and trajectory," Aria replied with calm confidence. "General, 50,000 people are going to die in 18 minutes unless someone stops that missile. I can stop it, and I believe I can survive to tell about it." The room fell silent as everyone processed Aria's proposal. What she was suggesting had never been attempted in human history, ejecting through a nuclear explosion and surviving. "Captain," General Carter said finally, If you're wrong about this, then I'd die, completing the mission instead of dying because we never tried, Aria replied. Either way, those 50,000 people live. 12 minutes later, Aria was strapped into her F-16 Fighting Falcon, racing toward an intercept course with the incoming nuclear missile at maximum speed. Her aircraft had been modified with additional radiation sensors, and her ejection seat had been equipped with every piece of experimental protective equipment the base could provide. "Phoenix, this is Control," came General Carter's voice through her headset. "Missile is now 127 miles from Los Angeles. Your intercept window is 67 seconds. Aria's F-16 was pushing Mach 2.1 as she climbed toward the incoming warhead. Through her radar display, she could see the missile's signature, a sophisticated weapon designed to penetrate the most advanced defense systems in the world. "Control, I have radar contact with the target. Beginning final approach sequence." Aria's plan required precision that pushed the boundaries of human capability. She had to collide with the nuclear missile at exactly the right angle and speed, then eject at the precise moment that would carry her clear of the initial blast, while the ejection seat's shielding protected her from radiation. "Phoenix, you are 60 seconds from intercept," called Major Torres from the control room. "Missile altitude 89,000 feet, speed Mach 4.2. You'll need to match trajectory for optimal collision." Aria adjusted her flight path with the mathematical precision that had made her one of the Air Force's most effective pilots. She wasn't just flying toward the missile, she was calculating the exact three-dimensional point in space where her F-16 would intersect with nuclear annihilation. 40 seconds to intercept. "Phoenix, if you're going to execute your ejection plan, your window is 37 to 42 seconds from now." Aria could see the missile on her visual display now, a sleek, deadly projectile carrying enough nuclear material to turn downtown Los Angeles into a crater. 50,000 people were counting on her to stop it, and she was counting on experimental technology and split-second timing to survive the attempt. 20 seconds to intercept. "Phoenix, initiate ejection sequence in 15 seconds. Control, beginning final approach, ejection in 10 seconds. Aria's F-16 was now on a direct collision course with the nuclear warhead. In 8 seconds, her aircraft would impact the missile at a combined speed of over 3,000 miles per hour, detonating the nuclear weapon at 91,000 feet altitude instead of at ground level in Los Angeles. 5 seconds to ejection. "Phoenix, execute now." Aria pulled the ejection handle at exactly the moment her calculations indicated would give her the best chance of survival. The ACES 3 ejection seat fired her upward and away from her F-16 at 150 miles per hour, just as her aircraft collided with the incoming missile. The nuclear explosion that followed was visible from 200 miles away, a massive fireball at high altitude that lit up the Nevada sky like a second sun. The electromagnetic pulse knocked out communications across 3 states, and the radiation cloud spread across 50 square miles of empty desert. But Aria's calculations had been perfect. Her ejection trajectory carried her through the edge of the radiation cloud in exactly 4.3 seconds, well within the protective capability of her experimental ejection seat. "Phoenix, this is Control. Do you copy? Phoenix, respond if you can hear this transmission." For 30 seconds, there was only static on the radio. Everyone at Nellis Air Force Base assumed they had just witnessed the heroic death of Captain Aria Blake, who had sacrificed her life to save 50,000 innocent people. Then, through the electromagnetic interference, came a voice that defied every prediction and probability calculation. "Control, this is Phoenix. Chute deployed successfully. I'm alive and relatively intact. The experimental shielding worked. Radiation exposure was minimal. Request immediate pickup at grid coordinates 341-567. The celebration at Nellis Air Force Base was immediate and overwhelming. Aria had not only stopped a nuclear attack on American soil, but had survived an ordeal that should have been impossible to survive. "Phoenix, this is General Carter. Confirm your status. Are you injured?" Aria's voice came through clearly, now that she was clear of the electromagnetic interference. "General, I'm experiencing mild radiation exposure symptoms, but nothing life-threatening. The ACES-3 shielding exceeded all expectations. I ejected through a nuclear fireball and lived to tell about it. The rescue helicopter found Aria 30 minutes later, standing in the Nevada desert with her parachute deployed around her like a giant flower. Medical examination revealed that while she had been exposed to significant radiation, the exposure was well below lethal levels thanks to the experimental shielding in her ejection seat. "Captain Blake," said Dr. Michael Miracle Anderson, the flight surgeon who examined her, "according to our radiation detectors, you should be dead. The levels of radiation you were exposed to during that ejection should have been fatal within hours." Aria smiled despite her exhaustion. "Doctor, sometimes experimental technology performs better than its specifications. The ACES-3 shielding didn't just protect me, it saved my life while I was saving 50,000 others." Colonel Williams, who had initially thought Aria's survival plan was impossible, was the first to congratulate her when she returned to Nellis. "Captain, what you accomplished today isn't just heroic, it's a redefinition of what's possible in aerial combat and survival." Major Torres, who had run the probability calculations for Aria's survival, was amazed by the outcome. "Phoenix, according to every model we ran, your survival probability was less than 0.1%. You didn't just beat the odds, you obliterated them." "General Carter," Aria said during her debrief, "I want to be clear about something. This wasn't a suicide mission that accidentally turned into a survival story. This was a calculated risk based on experimental technology and precise execution." General Carter nodded with obvious admiration. "Captain, you just proved that sometimes the most heroic action isn't accepting death, it's refusing to accept that death is inevitable." The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of Aria's achievement. The nuclear missile she had intercepted was carrying a 50-kiloton warhead that would have devastated downtown Los Angeles, killing at least 50,000 people immediately and exposing hundreds of thousands more to lethal radiation. By detonating the weapon at 91,000 feet altitude, Aria had dispersed the radiation over 50 square miles of empty Nevada desert, causing no casualties and minimal environmental impact. The electromagnetic pulse had temporarily disrupted communications but caused no permanent damage. But perhaps most remarkably, Aria's survival had demonstrated that the ACES-3 ejection seat's experimental radiation shielding was far more effective than anyone had realized. Her successful ejection through a nuclear explosion would lead to improvements in pilot protection systems that would save lives for decades to come. "Captain Blake," announced Secretary of Defense Patricia Shield Morgan during the medal ceremony, "your actions on this day represent the highest traditions of American military service. You faced impossible odds, refused to accept inevitable death, and found a way to save both 50,000 innocent lives and your own." Aria received the Medal of Honor for her actions, but she always insisted that the real heroes were the engineers who had designed the experimental shielding that saved her life, and the mission planners who had given her the information she needed to calculate her survival. Aria's survival of a nuclear ejection became legend throughout the Air Force and the broader military community. Her technique for calculating ejection timing and trajectory through extreme radiation environments was incorporated into survival training programs, and the ACES-3 ejection seat's shielding capabilities were enhanced based on data from her experience. The mission also led to improvements in nuclear missile defense systems, with Aria consulting on the development of new interception technologies that could stop similar threats without requiring pilots to fly suicide missions. But perhaps Aria's greatest achievement was proving that heroism doesn't require accepting death. Sometimes the most heroic act is finding a way to save everyone, including yourself. Today, Colonel Aria Phoenix Blake leads the Air Force's Advanced Survival Systems program, where she develops the technologies and techniques that enable pilots to survive the impossible. Her nuclear ejection survival is studied by pilots worldwide as proof that with the right knowledge, equipment, and execution, even the most impossible survival scenarios can have positive outcomes. And when young pilots ask her how she survived ejecting through a nuclear explosion, Aria always gives them the same advice. Never accept that a mission requires your death if there's any possibility of completing it and surviving. Study your equipment, understand its capabilities, and remember that experimental technology sometimes works better than anyone expects. Sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is refuse to die unnecessarily. Because sometimes the person everyone expects to make the ultimate sacrifice is exactly the one who will find a way to save everyone while refusing to sacrifice herself. And sometimes the most impossible survival stories happen when brilliant planning meets experimental technology and perfect execution.